What's up, internet? It's me, Jake Coburn, and you are listening to another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I began to record episodes for this podcast at the beginning of the year 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the inspiration behind these podcasts was to provide a platform for the pillars and leaders of my community to share their voice and to help construct an inspiring narrative for people in this time of crisis, when a need for the upliftment of the spirit has been at its most urgent. This podcast centers around themes of art, creativity, spirituality, and psychedelics. And the incredible people I've had conversations with are all people who have bravely stepped outside of the conventional way of thinking and the conventional way of being and have transcended the matrix of the default reality, living life on their own terms. They are all people I respect deeply, and it has been an amazing opportunity and a privilege to speak to and learn from them. Most of these podcasts have been recorded live through Instagram, which is a new and somewhat experimental medium to conduct podcasts. I truly hope you enjoy this podcast and continue to tune in for future episodes. It's really a labor of love on my part. And thank you so much again for listening. Without further ado, here's the show. This episode is with Marya Stark. Marya is a very powerful and talented vocalist, singer, songwriter, and also a teacher. She helps guide people to access their voices. And she and I, in this conversation, spoke about using our voice as a means to connect with the sacred, to allow our voice to be an instrument that is played by higher consciousness, by source, and by the creative spirit. I got off of the call with Marya feeling genuinely inspired and having a genuine desire to explore my voice and to connect with the mystery through the means of singing. So I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope that you feel inspired just as I did.
Hi. It just took a little moment. I'm so happy to be here.
It always does. We're still working out the kinks of this whole technology stuff, but hey, do it.
We're creative and resilient. So if anyone can do it, it's certainly us humans.
Yeah, for sure. How you doing?
Well, it's such a weird time to be alive. And
It's a weird time to be a human, yeah.
One of the all things considered, I feel in the flow, on purpose, grounded, creative, in service.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those things have come through for me too. I feel like I've been so productive these last few weeks, and time has gone by very quickly. But I think that if you're aligned with a greater purpose and that's where you're putting your energy in this time, that it's a lot easier to ebb with the flow of all the strangeness, because you see how you fit into this kind of puzzle piece of the greater life and reality that is unfolding.
Yeah, well, and it's like there's like an also morning cycle that I was just talking to a friend today about it. It's like we're so in mystery of there's something dying and we're not quite sure how when and how it's gonna die and what that looks like, and so we haven't quite pulled the plug yet. So we're like in the pre-grieving, which is very disorienting, but we haven't been able to like fully go into a deeper level grief cycle because we just don't know what's going to change. And so it's very ambiguous, and I think I'm just trying to do my best to cultivate a good sense of humor and also just take care of my nervous system, whatever she needs.
Yeah. Are you in Santa Cruz right now?
I'm in Santa Cruz,
Cool.
and yeah, it's like evening time right now. I know here it's morning time in Bali. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's timeless right now. Do you feel like time's just kind of like lopsided, and like you're saying, like days and weeks blend together, and like what does time even really mean anymore?
Yeah, I felt like a kind of acceleration of time. I feel like lately, just
Uh-huh.
things have been going by so quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
about that grief, like I've definitely come into periods of time where my heart feels really contracted and my mind wants to label like a reason to it. Oh, it's because of this or it's because of that. But it's also just understanding this process that we're in collectively that we're all connected into. And I
Mm.
listened to this really moving talk the other night by Pema Chodron, who's a
Mhm.
Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Western Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And she was talking about how these kinds of emotions that are rising up for us in this process can be our doorway into this shared compassion. Like it can be our doorway into compassion because whatever any individual is experiencing here, there's the realization that everybody is kind of experiencing something similar right now. So if you're
Mm.
feeling fear, or anxiety, or grief, or loneliness, like all these conditions that the whole world is afflicted in with right now, that could be your way of entering into that place of sharing with the human condition and sharing with that kind of collective experience and struggle that's occurring right now.
I love that perspective. So like how expanding beyond our own little bubble and like connecting, like, oh yeah, we're all in this together. That can I can feel that open my heart a bit here and there.
Yeah, it's amazing how when you transcend the individual story and you start to look at things more as this shared experience with others, it reduces the suffering greatly. There's a
Uh-huh.
totally different quality to it. It's much more acute when it's kind of like all about me and I'm all isolated and in my own little story. But when you start to look at things like this is something we're experiencing together and it's
Uh-huh.
a symptom of being human, you know, that
Yeah.
this is like part of the human experience that we're having. It really helps to open that bridge and create a more like unified state of consciousness.
I love that. And I feel that way too. It is that thing of like, wow, because we all have personal things we're mourning around this emergence. And yet when we can see it as a happening, like, wow, we're in a happening now. Like this is a total like plot twist. And
Yeah.
now it's all in the game, and we're all transforming alongside each other. And I love that experience. It's like there haven't been that many moments in my life where I have felt so connected to like everybody having like the same conversation.
Yeah.
We're all having the same conversation or like the same topic. It's all just kind of around here, and like now here's the center node, and the side conversations are happening around it, but like it's the center of the mandala for our entire planet right now. It's like, so with that kind of single pointed focus, immense medicine is available, and it will be really like, I'm just so curious. Like I'm so curious as to what will
Mm,
continue to emerge through the collective and through the like pressure cooker and through the um like the transformational cook that we're all in. It's like, oh yeah, I've been really excited to dream into the possibility of a renaissance as a result of this kind of spiritual gym that we're all in.
mm. Yeah, I think curiosity is the antidote to fear in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Just to be, yeah, curious, open to what's going to happen and not start to jump into assumptions in your mind and get all freaked out about those assumptions.
That was the first 3 weeks. Okay, we gotta.
I'm curious about this idea of this renaissance and what you see that looking like.
Well, my belief at this time, at least, because we're all kind of, I like the idea that uh, limitations breed genius. And there's this aspect of like I don't know if you've heard this kind of idea where when you have a little children in a playground, but there's no parameter around the field, they'll all stay really close to the sandbox. But if you put a fence around the field, those kids will explore all the way to the edges of the boundary of what's possible. And right now we have this kind of boundary around us in a way. It's like we're limited in certain ways of how we've expressed ourselves, and so that I want is like we're confined now to, we have this to work with. And I think that for ingenuity can be an incredible tool for developing new ideas, for developing new ways of creating, for digging deeper in one area rather than spreading ourselves thin in many different explorations. It's like, well, like half of our options just got cut off, cut out. And so now what? Because humans' innate drive to survive, and I think the blueprint that we have on a soul level for thriving, it's still alive in us. And now we are having this, this like epidemic and like existential like chaos, which I think it's going to look a lot like new forms of art, new language, new shared language in the culture. I think it's going to look a lot like people doing a whole other level of shadow work and normalizing certain kinds of conversation around what isolation breeds in family systems and trauma and recovering from trauma. And I think that that's going to open a lot of doors towards releasing a whole different kind of energy flow. And I think also this like containment, once there's a opening, I don't know, I think there's just a quality of life force energy that's going to come online for a lot of beings that is going to be it's going to just reveal all kinds of renovation.
I guess it's kind of like if you put a cap on like a soda bottle and shake it up, and then there's just going to be an explosion of life force and creativity when that pressure valve can finally be released. This kind of tension and then this release. So we jumped into this conversation. It's awesome, enjoying it. But I would love for you to just tell us a bit about yourself, for people that aren't familiar with your work and your music. Just introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi. Well, hi, friends. My name is Marya. I live in Santa Cruz. I am a bard and a songwriter is my first love. And then I love to explore psyche and human development and consciousness and compassion. And, I love to explore ideas in music and musings. And so that's where a lot of my creativity runs. And then I'm a huge fan of creating shared spaces for exploring creativity. And so I teach a lot of online workshops, and at one point in my life I was traveling and doing retreats and doing concerts. We'll see what happens now, but I love to share about the voice and energetic medicine and psychology in the frame of courting the muse and cultivating a relationship with a collaborative energy, the divine, which I call the muse. And I love to just riff on that all day long and in as many little portals of conversation with other humans as possible.
I love that. I'd love to riff about that with you a bit. This idea of the muse and this idea of the artist and the creative being more as a channel than taking personal ownership over the creative process. And that's something that I've come to intuit more throughout my creative journey. And I've definitely had experiences that very much validate that perspective. But the idea that it's not so much me doing this thing, but more if I can make myself a clear channel for creative energy to move through me, then sometimes you hit that sweet spot, just the you know, the chemistry between you and the muse is just right for that creative thing to be birthed. I'm curious if you want to talk more about that and share your experiences with the muse.
Yeah, well, and it's just been such a fun, you know, I think of um of magic stones, you know, like magic stones as these like alchemical pearls that we sort of go on these soul quests to find within the fabric of reality and within the fabric of our own being. And I feel like this like alchemical pearl that is this conversation has become the center of my altar really in the last 15 years, especially in the last year, because it's so multidimensional. I feel like there is this, like you're saying, this real lucid experience of having Marya kind of get out of the way, or building a quality of relationship with the construct that I have come to know as Marmar, which has all of my personality structures and my, you know, survival strategies and my past experiences and lenses. So I have this person I know as Marya, and then I have these experiences of like ecstatic surrender to a state experience, which is like the feeling of all of my winds coming into the central channel. And then I'm actually having an experience of going beyond self, but still being really deeply present and in here. And in those moments, like being like receiving some like portal into a complete bundle of some frequency energy that is sound, that is muse, that is craft. And then it's like my job to hang out long enough in the room of that sphere to like see everything, to look around, to smell, to taste, to touch, and let it emerge with my imagination and let it come through. And then like crap, and then it becomes this like song or art piece, and I'm like, whoa. And then I it's like becomes this mirror, right, of like, wow, like I got to enter this room, this like crystal chamber of divinity, that is like personal, transpersonal. And like I had a pen in the right moment, and like, you know, the oracle bubble spells were coming through, and I was like, and then, but then it's usually this like really deep medicine piece for me as an individual, because I was in the room, you know, like I was there. And so I've always mused, it's like, wow, how much of this is me? How much of this is a future me, like communicating with my past me and like building some bridge of wholeness through these like sound song pearls that are like threading the net of jewels of all creation together. And I'm just like hanging out on the threads of it, like trying to listen to the little reverberation of the string being plucked by all the angels. And then there's these moments where where like I'm chasing it, you know, because I'm hungry and I'm frustrated, and I'm like I need to have a release. Like I need to have some like orgasmic experience, or I'm going to implode. And so then I'll like go like digging in the dirt, and like chasing that muse. I'm like, can I come back into reunion with that energy, because it was so divine. And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes just start whittling my stick and a little sharp for the moment when the muse comes back. And I think those moments are important too, because I think when the channel is open and like in that receptive flow, it's cosmic. And I think when my channel isn't totally open, like it's a good time for me to just do my due diligence and like keep working the muscles of surrender. And like muscles of surrender, it sounds like a paradox, and I think it is. And I think it's one of those beautiful paradoxes that as an oracle bard is one of the things that is like this divine tension inside of me that like keeps the fires of love burning in my heart.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, about this relationship between you as this ego self and this creative process.
Yeah.
And I found that actually the creative process can be one of the best doorways into that kind of ego release,
Mm-hmm.
because you know, sometimes you're all in your story, but then you sit down into a creative process and then you just lose yourself. You can
Mm-hmm.
lose yourself in that creative process sometimes for many hours, and it's like you disappear. in those moments, and something else comes online that's like a more expanded definition of yourself and a more expanded awareness. And something you were talking about with that fishing or the hunting for the song, or hunting for the creative jewel. A lot of different artists have different perspectives on this. So there's people like, have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
It's one of my favorite art books.
Cool. Yeah, that book is great. But I mean, he talks about the muse, and he has a similar perspective. But his perspective on it is discipline is really essential to kind of to show up every single day and kind of go hunting for the muse. He's a little bit more like, you could say in a way, aggressive about it, you know, like more it's not a receiving, it's more of like an acquiring type of energy, you know. And I've had experiences of that, but I think that some of the most meaningful works of art that I've created, the most meaningful creative works I've done, have come through more of a grace kind of process, where it's like I receive a kind of inspiration. I just happen to be calibrated to the correct frequency to allow this thing to kind of come through me. It's not like I'm every single day like militaristically at my easel at like 9 a.m. or whatever to catch the muse.
It's interesting, and when I teach, I teach it as a balance. I think for me, it's had to be a balance of both. Or like if I just wait to be inspired, I'll get lazy. And so I challenge myself as if it was my spiritual practice to do it even when I don't want to. It's like, I don't want, we don't always want to meditate, but to overcome the resistance to opening. And I think it's that negotiation with like, where am I in resistance and why, which then becomes like a beautiful conversation of compassion with ourselves. It's like, what is the thing I don't want to say, or where am I resistance? Where am I holding tension in my being? That deserves some attention, and sometimes something like a piece of grace won't flow immediately through unless I do some work to just mind dump and like just fuck around on the guitar for a while, or dance, or like do these things that I know are gonna open my channel so that grace can come through. And sometimes I'll do those practices, and for me, they're writing a song about the thing I don't want to say, or like writing a song that doesn't feel like it's grace yet, but it's like, it's getting like a layer of mental garbage out. And then I'll work it like a song, like I would just to like try stuff, experiment. Like I feel like it's this experimenting in the sandbox of words and sound and shape. And then I might get like a nugget in there, and I'm just like, ooh, that's the nugget. Like some turn of the phrase, I'll just be like, oh, that's what I was trying to get at. And it might take me like 4 paragraphs of stupid writing that like I'll never share again. But like I did it because I had to do something to get into that thing. And then I'll find this thing and I'm like, oh, that's the door to grace. And then that's the thing that will start to blossom on its own, and then I'm like there and just bearing witness to it. But I know for me, it's been a cultivation to, if that's not just happening, I know how to get myself there, or at least I have practices where I could make the attempt and I set the table for the guest to arrive. Even if they don't come, I'm like, well, I'm setting the table for you. And it's like, the more I set the table for the guest to arrive, the more they show up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you had to work for a long time at your craft to become a gifted singer, a gifted songwriter. And it's like you've sharpened your tools. So now when the muse is in your field, you're like, I'm ready. Like, let's do this, rather than somebody who doesn't have that preparation background.
Right. Yeah. And it is the preparing. And I think that's where discipline comes in. It's because it's like, well, I'm practicing a form, which isn't necessarily about creative ingenuity, but it's more about going through the scientific process, and they're a little bit different. It like, and so I hang out in both sides of my brain, and to cultivate different parts of the toolbox. It's like, okay, like if when I'm in a songwriting process, my whole neural like process is online. Sometimes I'm more hanging out and like, let's get rational, like let's go into the etymology, let's like hunt words, let's do some research. And I think these parts of creative process don't get the same kind of like we exalt these moments of being in transcendent flow, and I love it. I love a good high, I love a good state experience. Woo. And I know for me that like the times that I'm just writing or like thinking about things, or like researching words or researching stories and going, oh, that's intense. And then like listening to myself and why that, like, that's all really juicy creative process as well. And so I think that's for me when I go hunting for the muse, it's like, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the research and preparatory work for then like, okay, now the winds are on and now I can sail this boat to wherever, like what I was feeling in the field sometimes for weeks or months. I'm like, oh, there's a muse here, but my channel's not quite open enough to like bring it in. Like, what do I need to understand about my reality to be able to hold that perspective that's trying to come online?
It is kind of like catching a wind or like catching a wave or something, like a surfer. The surfer needs to prepare to get to a point where they can even catch and ride those waves and stay balanced. That's that's the technical side of things.
Yeah.
But then there is also the grace of the wave coming or not. So it's the meeting of those two. It's kind of like, I think of the creative process as a real merging of the masculine and the feminine. It's a real balance of the two, because there is the feminine process of the surrender and the feminine process of the receiving from the muse. There is also the masculine process of needing to initiate some kind of willpower and the kind of the controlling of the creative process also, like the guiding of it, the leading part. Yeah, that thing with the mind dump, it is really useful. That's something that Julia Cameron talks a lot about in The Artist Way, is doing these 3 long form pages of just handwritten stream of consciousness mind dump. And that can be, yeah, it's amazing how much can be released in that process and how much that can open the creative flow to just I mean, you're not really doing much, but just to sit down and just start like writing nonsense on a piece of paper, it does amazing things.
I mean, it's like, it's a simulation, I think, of like all of the, like how we're just tracking so much information. It has an opportunity to just like get in a, like, here I am. It's not just here in the psychic now, it's like here in front of me, and I'm in a feedback loop of assimilating and digesting. And then it's like, okay, we get the top layer, and then it's like, okay, what is that layer deeper? And then I mean, that practice has been with me for a long time, many years of writing almost every day and getting
Do you do that every day?
pretty much.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, for like over a decade, I'd say I've been writing every day, or most days. A lot of days, enough days to feel like it's on the timeline, is like, oh, have I done right? Like, if I find myself spacing out and be like, what should I do with myself? I'm like, oh, time to write for 10 minutes. Got it. And I also did this, I have a similar practice with vocal toning, where like I'll have a looper set up, and through every day I'll sit down for 10 minutes and I'll just like be in a flow of like that spontaneous, both like sounding with my whole body, and maybe I digesting like subconscious material or emotional experiences, or just like what, like playing with my imagination, like doing, like some some like relational clarification. Like if I have a relationship that's in my field that's just agitating me, like I'll bring it into my vocal meditation, because it's then now I'm making sound with it, and I'm connecting to my core essence, and I'm connecting to my root and my mechanism of vibration, and I'm vibrating this like field of coherence around me and with my consciousness material. And then it's opening the channel, right? It's literally opening my vocal channel, and it's giving me a place to be really present with what's going on in the moment.
Wow.
And so that's been like one of my favorite practices that I've really adopted over the last few years, after hanging out with Elijah Ray, who taught me, who like just started playing with me in vocal alchemy, and I learned so much from him. We're actually teaching a course on this called
Wow.
Vocal Resonance starting next week, where we talk about some of these methods, and it's basically how do you work with your voice as a tool for coming into your power and being an open vessel to receive the present moment.
Wow. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that singing is one of the most powerful things that we have to connect to something larger than ourselves. And it's fundamentally spiritual. It exists in all spiritual traditions, all religions, whether it's Baptist music choirs or it's Icaros in a maloca for an ayahuasca ceremony. There's something really just profound about feeling source energy vibrate through your body, and to be this musical instrument for this larger thing. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of people though, you know, I've known a lot of people who want to sing. They have an interest or a curiosity or something for it, but they're really afraid. Like there's so much of a stigma against singing if you're not like American Idol level vocalist. You know, people feel there's a lot of judgment against their voice. So what would you recommend for somebody who doesn't have any prior training as a vocalist or experience, but they want to connect in with their voice more to feel that connection to spirit or source as like a spiritual practice?
Well, I think the first and foremost, we have to kind of have so much compassion for ourselves and the nature of the perfectionist culture that we incarnated into. You know, where there's a lot of cultural hypnosis around accomplishment, perfectionism, and there's a lot of noise in the atmosphere around what like receiving love and getting, you know, this a specific kind of feedback. And it's part of a cultural injury, I think, because we've really disconnected to our birthright that is music making. I mean, like we are natural sound makers. It's one of the things that when we're involved in making music, like our whole neurological system's turned on, our body is like working together, and it's this thing where we're literally in communion with all of creation through the vibration that's coming right from inside of us. And so it's very like powerful because it is so vulnerable, because it's such a naked experience. It's like one of the more naked processes, because it's like we can't totally control how we sound. I mean, we can develop skill, but we can't really control it. And we don't have a lot of choice as to what the like nature of the sound is that we as a unique instrument make. Like we're born with the like quality of sound, and then we can develop it. And so if we've had an injury, like a psychological or emotional injury as a child or something, because you know some adult was like, hey, shut up, stop making sound, because they had a bad day and like got in a fight with their boss or whatever, and then like we take it personally, we're like, oh, I can't, I have to play small or else, you know, mommy won't love me. You know, it's like there's just all of these little agreements that we make as small beings, that determine how are we going to navigate and build safety and get the love that we need to survive. And so again, compassion with ourselves for any belief system that an indoctrination that we incurred, that we acquired as through a life. And then it's the doing it anyway is the feeling of what is it to actually, and to start slow. Like I like to just start with humming every day to my every cell of my body, just like and just actually feel the nourishment of the vibration of my own sound kissing every cell, as if I was in a divine union with the cosmic composer of all that is. And like in this moment we're making love, and it's happening through my own voice kissing my being. And what would it be like to just hang out there for 3 minutes? You know, it doesn't have to go beyond that, but what if just like 3 minutes of that, what does that feel? Does that soften things a little bit? When I started doing that every day and really bringing in the tantra of sound, and as an exercise of self-love, self-care, devotion, expanding my experience of the moment to include the mystery and divinity, and bring it into my body through the sound of my voice, like a lot of things started clarifying that were really powerful. And I noticed that for myself, when I stayed with it, a lot of those old belief systems and old stories about, oh, I can't do this because I have to be perfect or whatever, they just started coming up and dissolving. They came up for love, to receive acknowledgement. I got to mourn and hang out with my little 7-year-old who like was scared to be seen and be heard, and like love her. And now she's singing with me, you know? And so I think it's a gentle process of reintegrating our lost innocence, and to invite them back, like our inner child back into the playground. Like, wow, how much exploration can we do? How fun could this be? How much pleasure could there be here? What would it be like if I tried to make sounds like a bird? What would it be like if I tried to make sounds like the whales? Like, what if I did the most innately human natural thing and just started mirroring everything around me with sound? What would that be like? And to return to the mindset of a child exploring the terrain of their reality through the voice, with no other need to perform, no one else. It's not about anyone else. It's really about like, how curious can I get about being alive? And can I use my voice as a tool to keep me present in my body while I'm inviting that level of presence and self-care in the moment?
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I do think that this idea of perfectionism censors our expression so much in so many different ways. And like, I love ecstatic dance because it's also a really open, non-judgmental space for people to explore the movements of their bodies. And there's a lot of shame around that too. It's not just singing; it's all these different forms of expression. Drawing too. I deal with that in workshops that I do to try to empower people to get over that fear of judgment, to allow the creative impulse to come through, because it's something that all kids do, you know. But yeah, it's just part. I guess it's a symptom of our culture to we have this culture that is like love scarcity, you know, and everybody is trying to find ways to make sure they have enough love because we're trained to believe that it's really scarce. And like here in Bali, for example, they don't have that program. Like their whole love is something really abundant. They maybe have scarcity around other things, that we might have more abundance around, like material objects. But they don't have a love scarcity. It's really deeply ingrained in their culture and how connected they are, and their community and their spiritual practice and stuff like that. But that love scarcity creates so much disease within people and contributes to so many like the adverse ways that humans behave. I feel like in our culture, because everybody ultimately is just trying to get trying to get love, and is desperately afraid that there's not enough or they won't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, and that's like a nice callback to what we were talking about before, where it's like that experience of being in this collective moment, right? Like in Bali, it's like they're connected to each other through their devotion, through the cultural just like spirit of we're in a we about being alive. And so there's no scarcity of love. And I think that that's really a a possibility for our whole planet now. You know, it's one of the potential future timelines that I see happening is like, wow, we're so in this together. What if one of the renaissances of our society is that we see at a whole other level that we are like so interwoven, and then what can we do if we actually liberate all of the cloaks and invisibility like shields that we've put on ourselves and disconnected from our divinity and disconnected our hearts from each other? Like what would it be like if some of those started to fade away, like, and that we could actually cultivate that yummy relatedness again with like the joy of discovery, of play, of experimenting, and stop being so fucking hard on ourselves and each other for like making mistakes or for trying something and it not working. You know, like one of my favorite creative partners, Joshua Penn, who we just released a song, Stargazer, that we co-wrote. He's such a fun person because he's such an experimental mind when it comes to sound. He's really pushed me in this way. And one of his quotes is that if we like everything we try, we're not being experimental enough. So can we get really comfortable with not liking things that we do, but not throwing it out of the window as wasted creativity or that there was something wrong, that it was actually an essential pathway of developing the willingness to try something. And so I'm hoping that we can cultivate that with each other and moving forward so that we can all have the delight to create, because it is so excited, because it is so connected to the greater than beyond individual selfness. You know, we have access to like divine co-creative codes, and like what would it be like if we just permissioned ourselves to do it?
Absolutely. I'm curious if kind of recognition or success as an artist has hindered your freedom and your experimentation at all?
I think my desire for success has 100% hindered me as an artist. My desire to be famous has been one of my biggest obstacles to being in the flow with my creative magic. And the experiences that I've had of any kind of success or whatever came because I only from moments when I wasn't focused on it.
Yeah.
I haven't had any success because I've tried. And I would say all of the things I created from trying to have success were kind of like half-hearted. And I would say like, yeah, one of my biggest personality journeys and like, you know, intimate landscapes of my own like unwinding of what has actually kept me back from fully shining in life has been this weird seed that I probably came in when I was 10 watching VH1, some music video on VH1. I'm like, that's what being cool as a singer's like, and like I just took that on, and like that was the program running for 20 years, and like it was like I just like found it a couple years ago. I was like, it's taking up way too much real estate in my brain. Fuck that.
Yeah, totally. But that comes back, that's from that perfectionist culture, that love scarcity thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want love, you got to be famous, you know, which means you got to try real hard. You got to beat yourself up all the time.
Yeah, you got to be
You can't give yourself love either.
And like I think about kids these days, my God. And like they're growing up in like culture where like you have the capacity with like some strategy and advertising budget to like have your 15 minutes of fame. And it's like a really weird kind of like simulation of what it's like to be able to get that kind of fulfillment or strive for it, and then also the like I feel more than ever like we see the gears behind the curtain, like Oz is just like kind of we're in the last chapter and be like, wait a minute, it's always been a weird puppet show. Oh, I thought it was real.
Yeah. But yeah, totally. For me too, the times when I've felt some kind of lack and I've tried to compromise for that lack through achieving some kind of recognition, that's when my creative process has been just a struggle. But I find that when I plug into a larger purpose or something like that, like I'm less focused on how this serves me, and I'm more focused on how a particular project serves the other, like serves the larger self rather than just little self me. That creative flow is like 1,000 times stronger. It's like we're rewarded. It's like we're actually rewarded in a way from wanting to serve something larger than ourselves.
And I love that. It's like, where are we creating from? Why are we creating? And I think this is a really healthy question for artists to ask themselves if they find themselves struggling, or if they find themselves in like a rut or feeling uninspired, but hungry to feel inspired. And I think that is a major piece of it. It's like, what do you feel the world owes you? Why are you creating? Where are you creating from? And when we can clarify some of that stuff into a more clean burning flame, I feel like that flame burns longer and brighter, and it creates a fire and a hearth that actually draws energy rather than like explodes fire in all of these directions. And it's been a journey, man, because I grew up in the age of like Britney Spears and Madonna, like all of us, and Ani DeFranco and Alanis Morissette, and there's these just like very particular narratives of being a successful singer-songwriter female, blah 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 blah, and like the whole niche and branding shit. And like I struggled with that for years, and literally when I stopped giving a shit was when I found a current of like feeling like energy started like this operating system of my spherical reality around my art was just like, it was finally aligned and feeding itself, and now it's just like growing. And I feel so happy because I'm not trying to impress anyone or prove anyone or like find my place in the world. Like, I'm right here, this is my place in the world, right on this seat, and wherever I feel like being.
Amazing. Cool. Did you was that a natural process for you? Was that just something that you kind of like outgrew and it fell away, or was it a result of any specific kinds of like practices or?
I want to say it was both. Like, I think I'd like to say it was just it was maturity. Like, I just grew up a little bit. I got out of my Saturn return. I like made it through my like, savior complex years, and now I'm just, hanging out and being alive. So a lady in my mid 30s, like it could just be that. Or I think also it was deliberate. It was courting the muse, when I think about, and this is where I think this conversation around the muse gets really interesting, because I think it's so personal, but it's interpersonal, but it's like beyond individuality. And this is transpersonal experience, and it's all of those things happening. I started chasing a particular muse. Like, she was coming through the veils and she's like, I'm your main squeeze for the next few years until we're done. And I'm like, I surrender. And that muse, hunting her down, I think about the muse as when she's really strong, when it's like have a really particular energy signature. I see it both as like some divine codex of my higher self, but it like that code is coming through because there's some part of me that's disowned. Like, I've disowned that, and it's like I'm calling her forward for healing and repair, and then that becomes like another level of incarnation and embodiment. And so when this muse came really strong, I went through a total inner dismantling. Like I feel like the kinds of the places of disowned self that this muse revealed to me in my psyche and in the healing that I was in really allowed me to let go of some of my perfectionist rigid tendencies, and I received a lot of my inner child back and a lot of my joy back. And so it was some deliberate healing work, and I think it was also just a happening. Like it felt like something that it was happening spontaneously. Like it felt like something that was beyond my conscious control. It felt like she took me on a ride, like to go and know my soul. And it was like it was an adventure in interpersonal development and maturity and healing. And but I did a lot of conscious work to support that process, and a lot of the work that I did, again, writing every day. I sharpened my tool. I used my tools. You know, I wrote a lot. I sang. I did my vocal alchemy practice daily to process through some of those like rigid, like self identity energy bodies. These I like crystallized subtle bodies is how I see them. I sang a lot of those parts of me home, and I also received a lot of help. Like I had a couple of people in my life that were doing really next level energy healing work with me on a regular basis. That was really supportive. And yeah, some deep retreats to go and face myself, face the music.
Beautiful. Yeah, you said something a while ago, the resistance to opening. And that's something that I come into a lot, and I wanted to riff with you about why that is. But there are certain practices or certain things I can do, like yoga, for example, or like writing, or whatever it is, these things that open me up and kind of diminish the ego voice a bit. And there's such a strong resistance so often to doing those things. Like the ego really wants to hold on and stay in control. And if I threaten it in any way, it starts to get real, it starts to get defensive. So I'm curious why you think that is, because this is something I've talked to a number of people about, and it seems not like it's only my experience, but it's a common experience that people have.
Yeah, my thoughts on the matter from a like energy psychology perspective is that resistance can tend to lead towards undigested emotions, and undigested emotions tend to hang out in places of ourselves where we're scared to look, because there's ideas about ourselves or belief systems or experiences, and when we have resistance to being an open channel, my biggest stages of resistance tend to come right before I have a huge reckoning with an aspect of soul that was ready to be seen and held and reintegrated. And so when I do notice big resistance, and it hasn't always been easy, you know, I think it's part of like developing a resolve towards for presence and embodiment, and because there are moments that are, for me, come with excruciating pain, and it usually has to do with grief. Like for me, it's rage and grief and shock, and it tend to be the flavors. And sometimes it's really, and fear. And so when I can create a space for myself to say, hey, is there anything that I'm scared of right now? What am I telling myself? Is there anything that I'm angry about that I don't want to think about? Are there any things that I'm like struggling to understand that like keep me like popping out of the moment? And I can do some work to just be with myself really gently, in a somatic, nourishing way, then that can really help me to become available for the next layer of insight. And sometimes, and like I mentioned this before, sometimes I need to create something ugly or I need to create something that is an expression of the confusion, or like I need to work with the resistance as the path, rather than try and be beyond it already. Like if I am expecting myself to be beyond the whatever is right here, then I'm gonna be stuck for days, weeks, months. But if I'm just like, wow, I'm having resistance to like being in the flow, like what is trying to get my attention? Can I slow down enough and like be with the discomfort of the complexity of what's arising? Can I give myself 3 hours where I'm not on the internet distracting myself or like trying to figure out what to do next? Can I just actually sit here and cry or be pissed or whatever, you know?
Yeah, that's such a big part of it. For me, I tend to disassociate from my emotions by going into a story in my mind. And I find it's really helpful that if I get caught in some kind of narrative loop and I'm disassociated from the feeling, to really just bring it back to be like, okay, like how's my body reacting to this? And it's like, oh, I feel stiff. Oh, I feel contracted. I'm breathing shallowly. And then if I change those things, like what would happen if I move my body and become a bit more like loose in my body? What would happen if I breathe more deeply? Then that narrative tends to dissolve, you know, and then it releases that kind of like stuck emotion. Yeah, and psychedelics have been big for me too. I find that they can be kind of like an emotional enema, you know, that like a lot of people have like all of this emotion built up, but then if you take a high enough dose of a psychedelic, you have no um, defenses anymore to allow that emotion to just kind of like rage through you and do what it does. And sometimes it's a bit ferocious, but you feel amazing afterwards, because it can be, for some people, it can be years and years and years of like built up, pumped up, stored emotion that they haven't allowed themselves to feel or release.
Right, and then a catalyst comes and it's like, okay, no more ego structures to protect you. We're just gonna strip the masks off and cry about it for a little bit, rage about it, storm about it.
So
Yeah,
we only
and
have
then,
a few. We
yeah.
have only a few minutes left with this. Do you want to keep going? We can jump on another call. If you have to go, that's cool too.
I'll have to go in a few minutes. We'll have dinner here, just
Okay.
shortly after. So oh, because in IG just does an hour, yeah.
Only 1 hour. Yeah.
Perfect. This is a perfect amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
thank you. This has been amazing. Do you have any kind of like closing sentiments, any message you'd love for our listeners to take home with them?
well, I always come back to we have the medicine inside of us. We have this original medicine, and for me right now, it's really the medicine of the voice as a tool for connecting to the body, connecting to the present moment, connecting to our emotions, like that maybe are beyond what mentally cognized. And that just to even spend a little time every day in the gentlest way, humming and like just being in the body in that way as an act of truth, as an act of devotion and desire to be in this. Like I'm gonna every single day connect to the note that I'm singing in the morning. That is my call to the muse. It's my call to the great beloved and say, hey, I'm here. Thank you for another day. I'm hitting the drum of my heartbeat consciously with intention to start this song. Like, what can we create together? And I feel like we have that we just have it right in our body. All we don't there's nowhere we need to go. There's no book we need to pick up. There's nothing we need to learn. There's no one's permission that we need. Like, we have the medicine. So what I want to leave us with is like, let's do it. One tone every day to bring you back to the door of your greatest genius.
Yes. Yeah, and you inspired me. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to go somewhere,
Awesome.
make some noise. I'm going to sing and see what happens.
Yeah, call out to the muses And just for those of you who are still here hanging out with us, I have a course starting next Sunday with my homie Elijah Ray, Vocal Cord Resonance. The link is in my bio. Come learn about how to play in the Vocal Alchemy Dojo with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marya. This was such an inspiring conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me and sending love to everyone out there that joined us. Love you all.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening. And yeah, much love. Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Yep. So we did it, guys. That was another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I am the host. My name is Jake Cobrin. I want to thank you again for tuning in and listening to this episode, and I hope that this was a valuable experience for you. If you're interested, you can watch these podcasts live on Instagram. I am doing between 3 and 4 live podcasts per week. And if you want to find that, my Instagram account is _.cobrin._, just for aesthetic embellishment. And please subscribe to this podcast so that you can be notified of further episodes. And that's about it. Many blessings to you wherever you might be. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Be well.